We've got a jam-packed show. We're talking about basically every league there is to talk about, so we're not going to waste any more time. Stick around. Sports QuaranTV. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Sports QuaranTV. Chris, Dobson, Gerry Green. As you can see, we're wearing the poppies this week, which means it is Remembrance Day. There's a long weekend coming up. Please get out there and support your veterans. Gerry, we've got a lot to talk about. I teased it off the hop. We are basically talking about everything because it all seems to come crashing down at the same time. And we are going to start in our own backyard like we always do. And that is, of course, with the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. And I want to start off with the Charlottetown Islanders because we haven't given them a whole lot of love at this point in the season. But that is, they're playing right a little above 500 right now. But is this something that Halton's going to work with? Or do you think come trade deadline, the Islanders are going to be in sell mode?
Well, what do they have to sell, Chris, is my question. I mean,
fair.
There's a team there that is scoring less than 3 goals a game. They have a record of 8-7-1. And the reason they do that is they played 3 games at home this last week, and they won them. They were 2-4, Chris. Remember how scary it was always to go to Charlottetown and play? They were 2-4 on home ice. Now they're 5-4 because they got a victory over Blainville. They beat Moncton in a close game, and they beat St. John at home. And then they have 2 games this week against Cape Breton at home. So everything will appear like maybe it's back to normal, but they have a lack of scoring. They have nobody in the top 30 in scoring in the league. So there seems to be a power shortage. And Chris, the last 3 years, Charlottetown's been right there. Getting to the semifinals again last year and getting to the finals or last year in the semifinals, I think the 2 years before that. So they've really gone for it 3 years in a row. You can't do it 4 years in a row. We know how junior hockey works, Chris. You just don't have the assets enough to build a team year after year after year.
But, if you look at what they've done in Charlottetown, you talk about year after year after year. I mean, how many years, even when we were in the broadcasting world, even back to the Moncton Coliseum days, I go back and remember every year we started, Charlottetown was the team to watch. And this takes us all the way back to the Daniel Sprong days. I mean, every year Charlottetown seemed to find a way. But good on them. I hope they take this rebuild seriously. Of course, you've got Lucas Cormier, who is now in the AHL doing his thing. It's one of those things where you look at everything they've done right, and Jim Halton's done a great job. Every player you talk to would run through a wall for this guy. And I love seeing what Charlottetown's done year over year. It's great for their fans. Their social media guys, absolutely one of my favorites in the queue. Everything that team does, they do it well. And so, it's good to see them finally take this step in the rebuilding process. And it's not going to be long because you're right. They don't have a lot to sell. They've got a great man in the net, but at the end of the day, do you want to move him? Because no, then you got nothing. And not only are you only scoring less than 3 goals a game, you're probably going to start getting pumped for about 7 or 8. So you don't want to go that route either.
But it's kind of a different philosophy, Chris. Every time you've seen St. John, for instance, go for a championship, they build towards it and then they add a bunch at the end. And what I mean by build towards it, they might have 2 years there. They might be lean, but they're gathering picks, they're gathering players, they're gathering experience. And then they get to that point and then they make sure they have enough assets to acquire other important pieces to finish the puzzle. And then they drop off. As soon as they get that championship, they seem to drop off. It seems to be what they do in St. John, because St. John's now sitting with 4 wins and 10 losses in the early going this season, where Charlottetown is, as you say, have been consistent in what they've been doing. Halifax now is trying to be more consistent, I think. And they're being led by Jordan Dumas, who is now leading the league in scoring, Chris. And he's and I've said it before, if you get the chance to go see him, go and do so. He leads the league in scoring, leads the league in goals. He's played 123 games in this league, Chris. He has 170 points. As a 17-year-old last year, he had 109 points. No wonder Columbus took him. I don't know why it took to the 3rd round, why anybody wouldn't take him before that. But he's a star in the making. Halifax certainly sits on top of the Maritime Division and 3rd overall. And the funny thing is about the Maritime teams, Chris, remember we had the Fiona come through and we missed 2 or 3 games. Well, the Maritime teams are still behind a little bit on the Q teams. And so that's why they find themselves, some of them lower in the overall standings. But Halifax is a team to continue. And they're in number 8, I believe, in the top 10 CHL rankings this week.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But let's, stick hockey, change leagues. Let's go to the National Hockey League. And I want to talk about the New Jersey Devils and the Detroit Red Wings because we've been giving a lot of other teams a lot of love but how good have they been? I mean, are they for real? Are they actually good now? Yes, New Jersey looks great. To me, Detroit's still to be questioned.
They've been hovering for a long time, but then they get the likes of Heishers and Hughes and those guys that are building their franchise around. But the team that surprised me, of course, we talk about Las Vegas Golden Knights and what an entry into the NHL they had as an expansion team, and how fortunate they were that so many other GMs were so stupid to give them so many assets. And it was, Chris, they were really helpful.
I agree.
All the other teams learned not to do that with Seattle, but here now the Seattle Kraken, a year under their belt. And don't look now, Chris, they've won 4 in a row. They beat Pittsburgh twice. They beat Calgary on the road. They beat Minnesota on the road. They're second in the Pacific Division. They're 7-4-2. That's a team that's been sneaking up on me because we don't really, as Maritimers, we don't really pay attention to the Western teams as much as we should, especially the ones in the Pacific, Vancouver and Seattle and the teams in California. But my goodness, they are a team that's very surprising, and I'm happy for them. The other thing is Vegas is going to continue a road trip. They play in Toronto this week. It'll be interesting to see how the Maple Leafs have adjusted after coming off the road from LA and Anaheim and San Jose and winning 3 big games, including a game versus Boston.
Yeah, and speaking of Boston, that's where I want to go next. Before we go there, though, I want to talk, after we ripped Toronto apart a couple weeks ago, you're right. They came off that road trip. They got a couple wins at home, which is what they were looking for. This Leafs team was too talented. The goaltending question mark still to me is how things are going to plan out there. And is this thing going to sustain? This Vegas game is going to be a good one because Vegas has been playing some good hockey. But I do want to talk about the Bruins because that is with the fiery start they've had. Yeah. They've been excellent. They've been playing great hockey. Then they got the return of Brad Marchand. He joined that team. Now he's playing good hockey the way the Bruins are capable. The fans must be thrilled about. So overall, I mean, how good is this Bruins team? I mean, is it still too early to potentially say this could be the team to beat in the East?
And they've got a no-name in the nets. And being that he has a no-name, I can't remember it right now because he's come up through their system. But they're getting good goaltending. They've always had a solid core of defensemen. And it's funny how Marchand comes into the lineup and is ready to go. He's typical Brad Marchand, turning on a dime, hard in the corners, hard to get off the puck, and scored a pretty penalty shot goal against Toronto in that game on Saturday night. But the other news out of Boston is kind of puzzling, Chris, in regards to Cam Neely and Don Sweeney going ahead and wanting to sign this Mitchell Miller and the baggage that he brought with him, which is not good baggage. Would you not think, Chris, that they would have had the discussion internally, not only those 2 executives, but with the rest of the organization, including your captain who came out and said, I'm talking about Patrice Bergeron, coming out and saying, this is not our kind of guy.
So what really shocked me, and again, we only know what we've read. And, you look at the whole Mitchell Miller situation, and that is anytime an organization, especially with a team doing as well as it's doing right now, the issue is that every team is running up against cap space issues. So they're trying to get teams and players signed.
I know.
Now, what's shocking to me, and again, this is all what we know, and that is, you're right. The fact that Bergeron speaks out, other team members speak out, the fact that they thought this was okay to do and eventually got to the point where this isn't going to work out. But overall, it's shocking to me that the Bruins as an organization decide to go ahead. Cam Neely makes this decision. They sign the kid. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, look at the backlash this has come. Now, what's frustrated me the most is that people have compared this situation to Logan Mailloux at Montreal. I mean, different complete scenarios, but you're talking about young kids who the teams took backlash on, and everyone's like, well, why wouldn't you just do it to get away with it? He's going to be a great hockey player. I was like, well, look, it's a big situation. And again, I'm not one to speak on the other side of things as well, but I was very concerned to see, against the team's wishes, there was concerns. You would think that you would talk, especially Patrice Bergeron, maybe Brad Marchand. You have these conversations with your team internally. I don't know. I don't like that look. It's a bad look for the Bruins, but overall, look, it looks like they're going to do what's right. And that is where it stands currently. But overall, it was a bizarre situation for me.
Connor McDavid continues to be impressive and playing possessed. Let's use that word.
But the Oilers are struggling.
He has 13 games. He's got 13 goals, got 27 points. The number that stood out to me this week, Chris, is that Connor McDavid has as many goals as Austin Matthews has points. Matthews has 6 goals and 7 assists for 13 points in 13 games. As I just said, Connor McDavid has 13 goals this season. So, and again, he has, I think Matthews has as much to prove, more to prove, I think, than as a teammate in Toronto than McDavid does with Edmonton. I mean, they got to the semifinals in the West last year. Edmonton did.
But yeah, then they ran into Colorado. But Austin Matthews is going to be fine. Maybe he's off to not a typical slow start, but I mean, he's off to a typical slow start for Austin Matthews' sake, but the Leafs were struggling. They're going to turn this thing around. I'm not worried about it. But yeah, as far as Connor McDavid goes, he is a man on a mission. He's a shoot first guy right now. He is looking to make this happen because usually he's feeding to Draisaitl. He's doing both, but overall, I don't know. To me right now, the fact that, and again, we're going to move on here quickly, but the fact that Calgary and Edmonton are struggling, Huberdeau's getting called out in the media right now. Pittsburgh, should we be worried? Who knows? But overall, I don't know. Connor McDavid, Austin Matthews, nothing to be worried about. Let's talk about this in 3 weeks from now when, we're a quarter of the way through the season. So that being said, let's go to baseball, Jerry, because I could talk about National Hockey League forever. We got to get a World Series wrap up. The Houston Astros came away with a World Series win. I know it doesn't surprise you per se, but overall, were you shocked to see it the way it went down? I mean, the Phillies lost in those sweet powder blue unis in game 5, which that hurt my heart a little bit. I really like those uniforms, but good on the Houston Astros to come away with that win.
Yeah, 3 in a row, Chris. And the thing about after being down 2-1 after game 1 or game 3 rather in Philadelphia, the thing that impresses you about Houston, an article I read this week, is yes, there's 5 players still there from the 17 championship, but they've also been very close the last 2 years as well. And they're doing it all internally, Chris. They're bringing up players. They have a shortstop that's getting paid $750,000, and he was the American League Championship Series MVP. $750,000. Yes, there are some paid players on Houston, but they got the Springers out, and they got the other guys that were going to have to get paid, and they couldn't keep them. And they've got a bullpen and a pitching staff that's been developed through their system. That's something that I think Toronto's trying and starting to do. And you speak specifically of Manoah and Moreno and, of course, Vlad, Bichette. All those guys have come up through their system. And I hope Toronto is able to emulate what Houston's been able to do coming out of the dust, and in the last 10 years have been really good.
First and foremost, before we move on, I want to give you a full-blown thumbs up for using emulate in a sentence. I think that's outstanding. Second of all, keeping with the Blue Jays conversation, good on Alek Manoah. He's a finalist for the Cy Young. Now, that being said, he's up against Dylan Cease and Justin Verlander. There's no doubt Verlander's going to win this thing. But overall, just to have Manoah's name as a finalist here is fantastic. I love it for Jays fans.
Yeah, I do too. And if there's a discussion about Houston and I did hate them, Chris, when they were cheating, but I really do now respect the organization. Of course, you're happy for Dusty Baker too, who's been a baseball lifer and finally has his first championship.
Right. So now with the Jays, the offseason's where the question mark comes in. There's a lot of heavy rumor that the Jays are going to move one of their catchers in the offseason. Who makes more sense to you to move? Marino, Kirk, Jansen? What are you thinking here?
Well, Marino's the future. Kirk is proven. He was on the All-Star team, and what I don't know where they would have been in the early going, Chris, with Vlad and Bichette really didn't get off to great starts, but Kirk did. I don't know where the team would have ended up. I love Jansen, but I think if you have to get rid of one, you keep the future in Manoah, you keep the present in Kirk, and unfortunately for Jansen, the numbers are going to have him move on. I would think if I'm going to select 2 guys that I want to be help the team to be successful, those are the 2 guys I take.
Yeah, I actually fully agree with you there, which is something that doesn't happen very often. I usually don't agree with your thoughts and opinions. Let's move on to the NFL, because finally I get to talk about something once this episode that I'm passionate about, and that is the Indianapolis Colts have finally canned Frank Reich after a disastrous season. You get the highest paid O-line in the entire NFL because they were unstoppable last year. Now, the question was, did Jonathan Taylor look like a superstar because that O-line was so good? Now he looks terrible, but he's injured. But first it goes down, Matt Ryan, they put him on the bench. Then the offensive coordinator gets let go as a scapegoat. And then that embarrassing loss to your New England Patriots last weekend. And then I think that was enough. Jim Irsay said, Chris Ballard, I'm making the calls. I'm making the decisions from here on out. No more. Frank Reich, take a seat. But what the surprising situation came on in was the fact that former Indianapolis Colt Jeff Saturday is now the interim head coach for the Indianapolis Colts for the rest of the season. Now, why I'm laughing about this is because it's almost a farce and a slap in the face to anybody who is a coach in the National Football League, because Jeff Saturday's coaching experience, high school football. Now, I'm sure that while this was going on, I'm sure Jim Irsay reached out to Peyton Manning and probably offered him everything between Papa John's, Budweiser, and Diet Pepsi. Anybody that all that money's coming out in, I'm sure Jim Irsay offered him the lot of it to coach the Colts team, and I'm sure he easily turned it down. But overall, to see Jeff Saturday, I know that he is a staple in Indianapolis. Fans love him. I think this is a save face type of hire because there's no way, they've already made it on the record that Matt Ryan's going to be calling the plays. So with Sam Ehlinger slinging the ball, there's no doubt in my mind this is only to appease season ticket holders, because fans are furious with how this season's gone. With a record of 3-5-1 right now, this Colts team is embarrassing. I think at this point, they're like, throw Jeff Saturday in there to make the fans happy. Let's lose every game for the rest of the season, even though they're going to tell you otherwise. They're saying we're going to try to change morale and win this for him. Look, they've got a great defense. The defense have kept them in every game they possibly could imagine. But what's done is done. I'm hoping they lose. I'm hoping they tank and draft a quarterback at the draft.
Well, that was quite a Colts discussion we had there.
Goodness.
But the games last week were interesting, and specifically the New York Jets, 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 and how they got a victory against Buffalo 20-17. It really gave you a proof of the ability of the Jets in a big game like that, showed off how good their defense is and how their ability to possibly set Josh Allen back on his laurels, because of he possibly could get injured. We don't know yet whether or not he's been injured or not. And that sets up a good game for this week, in which Minnesota is going to play in Buffalo against the Bills. You take a look at the AFC East, Chris. Buffalo's 6-2. The Jets are 6-3. Miami 6-3. And my Patriots are 5-4. It's the tightest division in the National Football League. Meanwhile, you have teams like Tampa Bay leading the NFC South with a 4-5 record. So Tom Brady's still right there in the mix of things. But what a sad division that is. So those are the games that I think are going to be exciting this week. The Eagles are back in action. They got a bye last week, Chris. They're going to play Washington on Monday night. So that should be an interesting encounter.
Tom Brady undefeated since becoming a single man. You got to watch out for that now. Watch out, everybody. He's on a tear. All right, we've got about 2.5 minutes left before we get to the wrap. Let's go to the NBA, because a lot of things have kind of happened there. We can only talk quickly about it. But of course, Kyrie Irving suspended. No surprise there. I'm surprised it took as long as it did. Were you shocked to see that?
No, I'm just...
I know.
Tired with his, and the apology wasn't good enough. Everything was not good enough when it comes to Kyrie Irving. He thinks he's the smartest man in the room, as Jay always says, and it's painful to think there's nobody there to him to bounce his ideas off, and nobody there to say, don't you think you maybe might want to rethink that? That's what's been painful about it. And the Nets in general are painful for me. And unfortunately, they're
dumpster fire
all the time. They're in the news all the time.
All right. Well, then let's not keep talking about them. Let's talk about the Toronto Raptors, because some big news there. Of course, Pascal Siakam out with a strained abductor muscle. Looks like he's going to be reevaluated in 2 weeks, which means this thing is going to take a lot longer than 2 weeks. Who needs to step up in the absence of Pascal Siakam?
Well, I've liked what Barnes have done. Have you seen his Subway commercials? And it just makes you like him even more. These Bowlway and the smile and the personality. I think he is the guy, and I think he is going to step up and be the guy. Van Vliet is back, but I think Scotty Barnes, and he played. There was a game I watched the other night, and he goes hard to the hoop. And I love that about him. The interesting about the Blue Jays, the Raptors this week, Chris, they've got Houston at home. Houston's only 2-9 at this point. They play in Oklahoma City. They're below 500. And then they go to Indiana. That's going to be an interesting game in the East. to see how they're going to manage in the next 2 weeks without Siakam. But it's still, you got the Bucks on top in the East, and you've got Utah surprisingly on top in the West at 9-3.
What's surprising to me is news coming out of LA right now, too, is that the Lakers are actually rumored to be looking at trading Anthony Davis. Now, again, you look at Anthony Davis the wrong way and he seems to be injured somehow, some way. So if you can get a healthy AD, I think that's exciting. I don't know what's going to happen, although Russell Westbrook completely has turned things around for the Lakers at this point. You know, coming off the bench has changed who he is. But I would be absolutely stunned, shocked to see the Lakers possibly look at moving Anthony Davis. But again, weirder things have happened. I just think it's bizarre. The Lakers don't look as bad as they did when the season started, but hey, this is what it is, and this is where they're going with the Lakers. We'll find out soon. Well, Gerry, it's time to wrap this thing up. Let's close off this show. It's time for the wrap, and we're going to start exactly where you love to start every week, and that's with the Canadian Football League. Give me an update, man. How's the week looking?
Well, we're down to the Final Four now, Chris, as Montreal beat Hamilton at home and BC beat Calgary at home. So Hamilton is gone and Calgary is gone. So that allows Montreal to go into Toronto. And here's the big question, Chris. What is the attendance going to be in Toronto? They say they got 15,000 seats. It's at BMO Field, which is that soccer field. And the temperature is going to be 2 degrees with some possible flurries on Sunday, because both of these games are Sunday. Meanwhile, Winnipeg's been sitting and waiting. They finished on top of the league. They take on BC. Temperatures expected to be -7 and sunny. That's not good on the prairies, Chris. It's going to be a cold, cold afternoon in Winnipeg. The 109th Grey Cup goes on November 20th at Mosaic Field in Regina. You can guarantee it's going to be cold that night. I'm going to take Winnipeg. I'm going to take Toronto in the Grey Cup coming up on November 20th. Chris, what about Ryan Reynolds? He's in the news, but it's not the entertainment news, is it?
No, it seems to me as of late, Ryan Reynolds is all over the sports news. Of course, him and Rob McElhenney purchasing a football club in Europe with Wrexham. Now it looks as if we talked about as an update last week, the Ottawa Senators are now officially for sale. And he did make an announcement on the Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, that yes, it's not a rumor. He is indeed interested in purchasing the Ottawa Senators. Of course, he went to Vanier in Ottawa. He is Canadian. So now that he wants to dabble in these things, he did make it very clear, though, he is going to need a sugar daddy with deep pockets to help him get this thing done. But at the end of the day, as of right now, it looks like he is interested. I'm hoping they can find a way. There'll be some sort of consortium, I'm sure. But overall, you know, how great would it be to see Ryan Reynolds in the news here in Canada? He loves Ottawa, loves the NHL. Hey, either way, I'm all for it. Anytime someone like him of his caliber in Canada wants to buy a Canadian hockey team, let's make it happen. Let's get it done. Give me an update on the AUS, Gerry. A lot of exciting things happening there.
There is. Let's start with hockey, men's hockey, and UNB. We saw that they got off to a slow start this year, Chris, at 1-2. Well, now they've won 6 in a row. They're back on top of the standings at 7-2. It's St. Mary's that's at 6-3. Moncton had a little bit of a hiccup in the last week. They're down in third with PEI at 6-4. Both Moncton and UNB host Acadia and St. Mary's this weekend. So you want to see some university hockey, get out to the rinks in your town. And the women's hockey, I fail not to talk about them for no uncertain reason, Chris. But the UNB Lady Reds are 9-0-1. They lead the ladies, followed by St. FX at 7-1. And guess what? They meet each other this weekend in Antigonish. That should be a dandy. The women Reds have played 11 games, Chris, or 10 games rather. They've allowed just 11 goals. And also AUS football, the Loney Bowl goes this weekend. Mount Allison is playing at St. FX. Mount Allison hasn't been in the Loney Bowl since 2016. The winner of that match on Saturday will go to the Mitchell Bowl and probably take on the Western Mustangs, Chris, who are ranked number 1 in the country. The last time an AUS team got to the Vanier Cup, which is the championship of the country, was 2007, the St. Mary's Huskies. What about soccer, Chris? The Canadian the World Cup team for Canada had a scary moment this week. What was it about?
Oof, did it ever. And of course, the World Cup just being 2 weeks away now. Canada's star, native from Edmonton, Alphonso Davies, limped off against a match against Bayern Munich. It's a hamstring injury at this point, although they did come out right away and say, hey, this isn't going to affect his World Cup play, but for precautionary reasons, we are going to keep him off the pitch for the next 2 games before they head out there. But either way, you know, watching what the Canadian fullback is capable of, seeing a guy like him goes down, you have to think that any hope and dreams of Canada advancing through this group that they're currently in are all going to roll through the leg of Alphonso Davies. So here's hoping that it is nothing too serious. Here's hoping it is precautionary, because I can think of multiple millions of people across this country who will be holding their breath waiting to see if he will take the pitch in Qatar. That being said, let's close this thing out, Gerry, and let's talk about the Maritime Hockey League. I know it's near and dear to your heart. It's right in your backyard. So let's close this thing off, shall we?
Yeah, it seems like Summerside and Truro continue to lead the North and South divisions. Both had big wins on the road this past week, and sit on top of their divisions. They've won 4 in a row each, and Summerside has a 5-point edge on Campbellton in the North Division, and that's the game of the week. Campbellton's going to go into Summerside on Saturday night. They had a doozy of a game in Campbellton last Friday night, 6-5. Summerside won that one. Summerside and Truro are in the CJHL top 20s, as Summerside's at number 7, Truro's at number 15. The number 1 junior A team in the league, or in the country this week, Chris, and so far this season, is the Battleford North Stars of the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League. They're 17-0-1-1. Yes, you should be number 1, I guess. Speaking of number 1s, a couple of number 1 golfers are going to meet up in the match. Chris, can you explain what that's about?
Hey, why not? Let's get into this thing. On Monday, the announcement for the newest and latest version of the match was announced. I actually think this is really cool. You got Tiger and Rory against Jordan Spieth and Justin Thomas. This will be Tiger Woods' 3rd appearance in the match. If you look at it, this time they're only playing 12 holes. They'll be playing at the Pelican Golf Club in Bel Air on Florida on the 10th of December. I'm wondering, we joked about it off camera, I wonder if they're only doing 12 because that's all Tiger can handle. But I do know that last time they did this, they were allowed to use golf carts. Like I said, I think the first time it was just Tiger versus Phil. Then it was Tiger and Peyton versus Tom Brady and Phil. And now you got Tiger and Rory versus Jordan and Justin. I like this event when it happens. I always enjoy it. I like Charles Barkley being mic'd up in their ear, chirping the whole way, dropping bets and wagers. I love the match. I think it's great. It's a shame it's only 12 holes long, but either way, hey, they're doing it under the lights this time. I think that's really cool. But either way, I'll be looking forward to it again. That'll be on December 10th. Well, guys, it's been another great show. Hope you guys have a great long weekend. It is Remembrance Day this weekend. Thanks for tuning in, and we're going to see you next Thursday.